Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the Shed. I'm Maxine Fakara, I'm Praxis Oral's CEO, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's Shed Talk. We're going to talk candidly with invited guests from our knowledge exchange ecosystem. And we're all really looking forward to hearing from Tim Hammond and David Huntley from the Northern Accelerator today. Before we begin, and I know you're all Zoom pros by now, but just a couple of quick housekeeping points. We've got video and sound turned off for participants, so please send in your questions via the chat and Sean will get you queued up appropriately. Don't forget to include your name and organisation when you ask a question, please. Just to remind you too that we're recording this session and it will be made available to Praxis Oral members after the event. So with no further ado, let me hand over to Sean Fielding, who is Director of Innovation, Impact and Business at the University of Exeter and of course immediate past chair of Praxis Oral. Are we expecting any heckling from the local primary school next door this afternoon, Sean?
The primary school's doing sports days at the moment, so we may well hear them. But, welcome everybody to Shed Talk number 10, and it's 13 months in the shed and beginning to feel a bit stir crazy. Really looking forward to being able to get a haircut at any point in the near future, I must say. But it's great to see you all, and particularly great to have with us Tim Hammond and David Huntley from University of Durham and University of Newcastle, respectively, to tell us all about the Northern Accelerator. So Tim is Director of Commercialisation and Economic Development at University of Durham, and David is the IP Commercialisation Manager at Newcastle University. So David and Tim, welcome to the Shed.
Thank you, Sean. Nice to be here.
So it's great to see you both, and I'm sure we're all keen to find out what the Northern Accelerator is about. So tell us, Tim, I think you can give us an insight into what is the Northern Accelerator and why should we be interested?
Okay, thanks. It's going to be a bit of a double act, I think, in the next couple of minutes between David and myself. And hopefully I'm sharing a screen with you at the moment. Sean, if you can stick your thumb up if you can see something, that's great. I think probably helpful just to give people a little bit of background in terms of what Northern Accelerator is and what we've been doing. And I guess it's something that we've been working over the last five to six years across the universities in the northeast. You'll see from this first slide, I've got four universities on the slide here. That's Durham, Newcastle, Northumbria, and Sunderland. And it's been very much about building a really strong ecosystem around our commercialization activities here. We're universities that are relatively close to each other geographically, and universities that have been able to really work very closely in terms of pulling together a very strong set of processes to really support our commercialization activities. That's not to say we've got one single commercialization process for us all. We have our own commercialization teams, but I think what we've been doing within the Northern Accelerator is very much about building support to our internal commercialization teams to really drive that activity going forward. And we've managed to do that. We've drawn on external support to help us, and you can see some of the logos on the top of this slide. The usual ERDF logo, which people will know and love in terms of the support that has brought to us, perhaps in kicking the project off, and we maybe say more about that later on. But very, very importantly, the very strong support that we've had through Research England and the Connected Capability Programme to really help us really craft what we think is an interesting and strong system to support our commercialization. Whoops, I'm just going to try and move to my next slide. And to some extent, this second slide really sort of shows the activity in the round in terms of what we're actually doing. We're very much working to support activities in that pre-incorporation phase before we've really done too much to sort of really develop the ideas to provide support really at a very early stage in terms of what we're doing. And then to look at the post-incorporation support in terms of funding. So it's very much about sort of developing a fairly broad ecosystem around what we're doing. And that's encompassed everything from really looking at the ideas base. So the ideas which are coming out of our academic base, building a program to support our academics to become more entrepreneurial, but then also to support academics in terms of then knowing, if they've got ideas, knowing what they want, what they can do with their ideas as it goes forward. That's not been easy, and I'm happy to answer questions on that at a later stage, but we haven't got a single processor, we've got two, and that's really been determined really around the nature of our universities, the nature of our academics in terms of their stage of either career stage or in terms of their stage in terms of developing an idea. So we put a lot of thinking into that, and we've rolled out a couple of programs which seem to be running quite well in that sort of space. And that's really developing ideas and starting to feed ideas into the commercialization processes that we have at universities. We're running a program across the 4 universities, and we've put about 180 to 200 academics through that program so far. So a reasonable number going through. Indeed doing that online at the moment. We've been working very much about sort of shaping ideas, and we've used Research England funds to support that. We've been running pre-incorporation funding, which is basically tranches of cash, either at a low level, 10K to deal with feasibility ideas, up to 50K, which is very much about a proof of concept process, which will take an idea forward and allow it to be properly developed and commercialized. We've employed a particular route to actually support ideas by bringing in very strong management teams. I won't really say any more about that because David will say a little bit more about that in a moment. That's called the Executives into Business program. And that's very much about getting talented management skills into our teams at the earliest possible stage. We've used a program which has allowed us to support those executives using innovation support and assessment work. We've contracted an external provider to help us with that, but to really tailor some of the support that those executives can have with their businesses and hit the ground running as they go forward. And then very much looking at how we build that local ecosystem in terms of finance. Our long-term ambition has been very much about the development of a venture capital vehicle. We'll say more about that in this slide deck, and I'm sure we'll have a question on that later. But very much we've been working very closely to bring on board a venture capital partner. We've established a seed fund, and again, we'll say more about that in a moment. But really, it's all been there to just build that really broad ecosystem into which we can take our businesses and give them the best possible start, I think, as we take them out of the universities. David, I'm just going to hand over to you now to say a little bit more about the sort of progress that we've made.
Yeah.
Whoops, I'll just move to the next slide.
Yes. First of all, just in case of Newcastle colleagues on the call, Sean, my job title is Head of Company Creation, by the way. But and as Head of Company Creation, obviously, creation of spin-out companies is very dear to my heart. And really, that was where this whole Northern Accelerator program began, really. Tim and I getting together 5-6 years ago and really getting our heads around why we weren't successful enough in creating spin-outs, but also the high quality spin-outs. And that led to the concept of an acceptable management solution to a spin-out before we created it. And that itself led to the whole concept of Northern Accelerator program and the Executives into Business element of the Northern Accelerator program that really was the cornerstone of everything that happened afterwards, which Tim has talked about in the previous slide. So we've built a lot of other programs on the back of the Executives into Business program, but the Executives into Business program, we bring in executive talent pre-spin-out and incentivize them to get involved in spin-out companies has really been the cornerstone of the success of the program. This is, I think, Tim and my favorite slide in the world, and it kind of just shows the effect of the Executives into Business program and Northern Accelerated program generally on spin-out creation in the Northeast universities. Initially, it was Durham and ourselves, but now we've involved Northumbria and Sunderland and the results are there for all to see, really. What we're particularly happy about is that the level of increase in spin-out company creation, which we've gone from about 2 a year to over 6 a year, has kept going through the last COVID year. In fact, as anything, looks like it's maintained itself beyond there. So the core deliverable, if you like, of the program, which is to increase the quantity and quality of our spin-out companies, has been entirely a success. Can we move on, Tim?
Yeah, I'll just move the slide on. Sorry, David, I'm just moving screens. There we go.
So in terms of where we've got to as our deliverables on this program, in the Northern Accelerator program, we've placed 25 CEOs in startups and created 28 businesses. We've allocated 2.1 million to 50 proof of concept projects. And as Tim said, those are now starting to feed themselves through to the execs into business program and then to creation of a business. So really, we have a few examples of opportunities that we call our sweetheart opportunities, where we've put an academic into a training program. We've allocated proof of concept funding to his research. We've got him an executive, and now we create a spin-out company. That's all. There are several examples where people have just had part of those packages, but there are examples out there, people have had the entire Northern Accelerator package and now have established spin-out companies. So we think the Northern Accelerator program is a success as it stands, but we do want to move on from here. And the critical thing, almost final piece in our jigsaw, if you like, is the creation of a venture fund. The Northeast has, and there can be many reasons for this, but the Northeast historically is pretty rich in research within its universities, but pretty poor in terms of attracting investment funding to those opportunities. And we're really looking to address that. And that is our critical legacy of the whole Northern Accelerator program as far as we're concerned. We've received a small seed capital fund from the Research England project, the CCF program, and we've already invested in 8 of our spin-out companies to do that, to support those companies, sorry. But our real objective is the creation of a venture capital fund. We appointed North Star Ventures as our venture partner to achieve that. We set up all the necessary legal surrounding it, and now in the next 12-ish, 18 months, we're seeking to create a £15 million venture capital fund called Venture North that will really be, as I call it, the cream on the cake of the Northern Accelerator program. So that's where we've got to in terms of deliverables, and the venture fund is our final key deliverable we want to achieve in the next 12 to 18 months. Tim, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think, Dave, that's I think we've hopefully, Sean, hopefully we addressed your question, which is what is it we're doing and why do we think it's important? Mm-hmm. We obviously think it's important, and obviously I think you'll probably be asking us a few questions to really probe that. But I think the key message that's come out of this work is we've got an ecosystem, or the beginnings of an ecosystem which wasn't there. And that's really what we've been doing and what we've achieved, I guess, in terms of the development of this concept and the program.
Yeah, it sounds really impressive, Tim and David, and particularly as you built that in a short time. And I'm not sure, I'm sorry to get your job title wrong, David, but I'm not sure quite how long you've been at Newcastle, but I know that Tim's been at Durham for more than 20 years. So I'm just wondering, what was the trigger for doing this? Well, look at the other way around. What stopped you from doing this previously?
Can I take that one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, actually. I think it's fair to say that, I mean, when I first got involved with university spin-outs, I think spin-out companies was very much a Cinderella activity. I don't think we certainly weren't very good at it. I'm not sure many people were very good at it, perhaps one or two. We had a kind of, we had a road to Damascus moment, what do you want to call it, about 6 years ago at Newcastle, where we said enough is enough. We're just not going to keep creating spin-out companies that are run on a part-time basis by an academic. I know you should never do it anyway, but we just said we're just not going to do it. And we just said 6 years ago, unless we have a inverted commas management solution, we won't create a spin-out company. And the management solution had to be that one of the academic team left his or her university role to run the spin-out, or we brought in an external. 90% of the time, we bring in an external. That was our moment of, and we've never veered away from that in the 6 years. So that was our change. Initially, before we had Northern Accelerator program, we had to attract the external business person by sweat equity, which is what you'd normally do. But as most of us in this profession know, that's not that easy to get someone to come just for sweat equity, where they're giving up 6 months of their time to produce the business case, get the opportunity investor ready, work with the academic, etc. So Tim and I sat down one day and said, how are we going to change this? And that was where we came up with the Execs into Business program, which is a method of incentivizing the external to get involved in a spin-out company pre-spin-out, to produce a good business case, and then ultimately to join the company going forward. That was the key to it all.
So what's the incentive for them, David? You pay them, do you?
They get a fee, which is from Northern Accelerator funding, but they still get, critically, they still get the sweat equity as well. And I don't think our fee is £30,000 per project.
Yeah.
And this is very important. No, it's deliverable based, so you don't get paid for putting the time in. You get paid for coming up with a business case that's viable, and also raising the seed capital fund money to take the company forward. So again, the sweetheart solution is we pay an executive £30,000 through the Northern Accelerator program. They launch the business, they raise the seed capital fund, and that's the money they pay themselves going forward.
Yeah. So you've got quite a lot of aligned interests there, haven't you? Everyone's connected. So was that was the principal thing? You kind of sat down and said you can't face spending time working on these spin-outs that are going to kind of be zombie spin-outs for over a long period with nobody actually moving things forward. If you were going to put your energy into it, you needed to know something was going to happen in the short term. So
look, I'm not saying we didn't produce any good spin-outs before 6 years ago, but our hit rate in terms of quantity and quality of spin-out companies wasn't as good as it should have been.
Yeah. So if you look at the as a result of what you've been doing, clearly the numbers of spin-outs have increased. What else has changed, or what's changed most, do you think, about now that you've got the Northern Accelerator in place? Is your life easier? Is everyone so pleased with you in the Northeast that knighthood is beckoning or something? What do you feel are the principal things that have changed?
Tim, I think Tim's the one that's lined up for the knighthood, actually.
very hard.
I don't know. I mean, we're doing more and more spin-outs. We're more and more busy. Well, what's changed? I tell you what's changed for the. Let's forget the numbers a minute, because to be honest, you can always create a company. What's most pleasing from my perspective is the quantity has gone up. And how do I know that? It's because the metric for spin-out company increase is nothing compared to the metric for investment we're getting into our spin-out companies, and that's improved dramatically. And Tim can quote numbers.
So the quality of your spin-outs has improved significantly, you think? Yeah.
And also, I think I would say that we're getting more and more interested, which is hopefully where the legacy is going to come in. We're getting more and more interest in executives, business executives getting involved in spin-out companies.
What about the academics? Are you seeing more interest from them? Is there an increase in entrepreneurship?
I think so, and to some extent, you know, when the very early slide that I showed, which sort of showed right at the very beginning of the process, we're starting to build programs around our academics to support their development of entrepreneurial ideas. You know, as I said, we put nearly 200 through that program so far. So we're not dealing with, you know, what we, you know, people in our sort of roles often see the usual suspects coming through again and again and again. You know, what we're now seeing is a whole range of new academics coming through. You know, the proof of concept funding, there's nothing like a pot of money for people to be bidding for. Well, you don't get a pot of money. It's not like a grant that people will get a pot of money. They'll only get a you know, onto the sort of commercialization process if they've got a truly strong commercial idea. So you know, we're seeing a lot of different people coming into our, you know, into our sites, I think, through this, and then we're able to, you know, support and intervene with them. And indeed, you know, we've had colleagues who've done these sort of, you know, we do a program called Future Founders, which is, you know, people looking at founding. We've had a few people that have done that, and then they founded their businesses. Now, they had no idea they were going to do that before they went through that program. So I think, you know, in that respect, yes. I think in terms of some of the things we're doing with our venture fund and the concepts we're developing there, we are getting a lot more academic interest in terms of, you know, what we're trying to do there, and that's you know, it's a time when we're seeing people, you know, truly interested in what we're trying to do as a route to impact with a small I rather than the ref impact, but, you know, in terms of taking ideas forward.
Yeah, and from
sorry, Sean. I will say one other thing. I think the academics as a community increasingly understand the benefit of bringing in the external business person to work alongside them as well. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that relationship is critical, and I'm not saying it's always a match made in heaven. Clearly, that's not always the case. But by and large, the academics and the business people work together well.
Yeah. And if you take that, you know, that moment of you and Tim sitting together and saying, you know, we're not going to do this anymore, to now, how many days has that taken you to get to this point? You know, or maybe it was years. But, you know, what was the gestation period? Someone thinking of setting up their own accelerator, Northern Accelerator, how long do they have to give it?
I don't think it takes too long. Well, Tim, you might disagree. I don't think it takes too long to start seeing the benefits. I think it's you know, I mean, I think, you know, hopefully you can takes probably 6 months between deciding to spin something out, recruiting an executive, getting it through legals, getting it launched, getting it approved. So you start seeing returns quite quickly. I think we did. You know.
Yeah, I think you're right, Dave. I think there's probably two questions there. I think, Sean. One is if you're sort of getting into the process, how long did it take you as an academic with an idea? And I think, David, you probably addressed that question. You know, people can enter at any point, in that you know, you don't have to go right the way through every part of the process to get out at the end. But I think, you know, if you think about how did we develop the broad concept. You know, I guess we tested. Our test, I suppose, was the executives into business element of the program, which was the bit that we kicked off first, and we used European regional development funding to test that, and we ran a program which David led out of Newcastle with Durham as the initial partner. To that, which really just one demonstrated, is it a good idea to offer this this mixture of sweat equity, cash incentive to run it? So we tested that with the ERDF. That worked really well. We got a lot of new talent into our spin outs. We've subsequently won a second round of funding, and we brought in additional university partners in the second round to match our broader consortium. But in the middle of all of this, the Research England Connected Capability Funds were announced, and it was really quite a simple sort of thought process there, which sort of said, we've got a bit of the process and that's working well. How do we fill in all the dots in terms of what we need to do? And that's when we started to look at, well, let's think of the pipeline. Where are the ideas coming from? And that's where the Ideas Impact Hub work came from. How do we get them across the line? Which is where the proof of concept work came in. Obviously, we had the executives into business element, which we could then bolt into that, but then very much about looking at our local financial ecosystems, where we're going to get our investments from. So, joining all those bits together has been critical, and that's what the connected capability activity was about. And it's not just about the funds and the pots of money, it's about how the different university teams then start to work together. The question is, how much time do we spend on this? Far more time than we ever envisaged, I think, would be an answer. I project managed the CCF project, which you might think is a 10% sort of role. It's not. It's a full-time role alongside all the other full-time roles I've got in other areas. But it is very much about having all the universities. We work as a team. When we used to travel, I spent almost as much time in Newcastle as I did in Durham, and vice versa. The 4 universities are very much engaged, and we're running, obviously Zoom and Teams meetings now, but we are working as an operation team across the partner universities in a joined up way. Obviously running our own tech transfer operations, but it's the underlying program that sits underneath it that is the bit we've sort of sewn together as a group.
Yeah,
we'll learn from each other.
Where Tim earns his night, I think, is taking that core executive business program and then building around the other elements around it on either side of it. If pre that and post that, and that's so we have this quite coherent now model of the people can either use all of or part of, and that's been the beauty of the Northern Accelerator.
Yeah, I think it is really important with an ecosystem. That you do have all the elements. It's quite difficult taking people down a path and then they're getting stuck because there isn't somewhere that they can go through. We've had a couple of questions coming through, and I'm going to go to Emma Thorne's question first, and I'll come to John Bradley's in a second. Emma is from Set Squared, and which of course is doing something similar, but in the south. So we probably need to look to our laurels there with the Northern Accelerator snapping at our heels. What she's suggesting, are there some key factors? You talked about some of it. Clearly, the regional, the funding that you had from ERDF and then CCF was pretty key, and the key starting point being, you've got a bit of the executives, you've got a bit of the process of the executives into business, and you wanted to build all the other elements out around it. But if you were to think about the key driver for that, she's suggesting, is it the people, your teams effectively working together and making something happen? Is it the fact that the universities had become aligned? Is it being driven by a regional incentive, or regional priority? What would you say in terms of the sort of drivers for this, apart from obviously your own irritation at having to start up these businesses that take too long to get going?
Well, I think, sorry, I'll go. I think all of those, there's elements of all of that in the mix, as it were. Personally, I think the whole thing stands and falls. We've always generated the research. We'll continue to generate the high quality research. In my book, first among equals is getting matching the right executive with the opportunity.
Yeah.
All the others that Emma raises are quite rightly important and contributors, but unless we can persuade or incentivize executives to get involved, we won't create a high quality spin-out.
Yeah. Okay.
I think the only bit to add to that, David, is yeah, it's getting the executives right, but actually then for them to easily to be able to navigate how the universities work as well, because clearly, you know, we bring in people from outside and they're from different worlds, and I think what we've got within our individual offices is that, you know, that ability for them to almost be in the beginning to be almost part of our extended teams, but then for them to slowly then migrate out into the businesses as well. So I think having that ability that they're not coming in cold into a business as an exec, but they've got the support of the teams that sit within within the universities to to help them with the question about why isn't the academic answering my calls or not doesn't understand this business plan or whatever. There's that as part of it.
Yeah, you can't outsource the whole lot, can you? You've got to have somebody in-house to handle the peculiarities. A couple of questions then. One which is around disciplines from John Bradley, and then I probably want to connect that to a question that Barry Timmins has asked, which is about the execs. So just on the kind of disciplines, what are you seeing as the key priorities? And this particular question is about is it all science and technology, or are we getting some arts and humanities or social sciences type spin outs? And then Barry's question is, where do you get the executives from? Where do they come from? And are they also specialists in particular sectors that you can bring in? I don't know who wants to handle that. Do you want to start with that?
Shall I start with where the idea is coming from, and then David, if you could then handle the second question is where do we get the execs? That's probably the easiest way. I think we are seeing an emphasis on STEM, but not exclusively on STEM. And I guess when we've done a little bit of analysis of what our pipeline of ideas might be coming through, that gives us sort of an idea of where the ideas are coming from. Yes, we do see STEM coming through pretty strong, and I think you could regard somewhere between 40 and 50% of the ideas being in the sort of health life sciences sort of area, which I think is pretty common across the sector. But we're getting good ideas coming through, which I would say which would be more in the sort of renewables, energy, circular economy, zero carbon sort of area coming through. Some good data stuff coming through. Some non-science areas coming through, not necessarily always through the Northern Accelerator. I've actually got a spin out of our classics department, just as an example. And that's a spin out called Rescribe, which is actually doing work to translate manuscripts from, I think, ancient English, using I suppose good IT data, character recognition, but also the input from the classic scientists in terms of language. So that's an example of one spin out that's sort of come out of my area, which is perhaps not normal. That's never going to be it's not going to be our next sort of Google Translator, I suppose, in terms of its opportunities, but it's got contracts with libraries and other academic institutions, and it's actually making revenue and hasn't needed to raise a penny of venture capital to go forward. It's standing on its own 2 feet.
Yeah. Good.
David, should I hand over to you in terms of where do our execs come from?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. I have to first of all to say this is public money that we're giving away, so obviously it has to be done appropriately and correctly, and that's great, really, because it's all done very, very professionally and appropriately. So yeah, you have to be on our approved panel of executives. Is first of all, I wouldn't say getting on that panel is massively arduous, but you have to go through a basic qualification process. And then when we're looking for an executive, we put a tender out, and it's all done through Newcastle procurement. So it's just not just a case of ringing up your mates and see if anyone's interested. It's got to be a highly documented appointment process. I mean, when we started off 5 years ago, it was just people we know in the local community who we kind of we're used to dealing with SMEs and running SMEs, and we got them to sign up to the panel, and we probably had about 25 to start with. There's now over 100 people on our executive panel, which is great. So every time we're looking to appoint an executive, a tender goes out that any one of those 100 can bid against. What I'm pleased to, and we have executives from all manner of activities and all manner of backgrounds. What I'm pleased to say is that when we put when we put a tender out, we typically get 4 or 5 applicants, because, you know, we're by and large doing scientific applications. I mean, as Tim said, we have got some in life sciences, etc. But by and large, they're engineering and medical, and really following our research strengths, as it were. So we have, where do we get them from? It started off as being local business people. The net has got expanded quite rapidly because people have come to know about the Northern Accelerator program. We ask people who are going to do, academics who are going to do a spin out, if they know of people in their industry who might be candidates, we might talk to them and invite them to join the panel. But the recruitment itself is very much an arm's length professional procurement.
Can I just add one last point to today? I think the diversity of our recruits in terms of geographical diversity has expanded massively as a consequence. So we're not just reaching out locally within the Northeast. We're bringing in people right across the UK and beyond. I know David recruited somebody from Holland into one of his spin-outs, and I discovered that one of my executives is actually, I think he's a UK national, but he's based in Dubai. And you could do that, obviously, in this COVID world now, and you don't have to have them in the room. But we're not just dealing with the same old people that we always used to talk to. We're reaching much further. Yeah. And bringing a diversity of skill sets and investment routes and business methods as well, I think, through that process.
Perhaps a bit too much information in this form, I don't know, Sean, but when we come to the procurement process, the tender has some very specific business related questions related to the future of this opportunity as we see it, and the responses to those questions are obviously highly critical to our selection process.
So you've done an initial analysis of the potential for this idea.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, all these ideas come out of our tech transfer process anyway. So it's
Okay. So your Dubai guy is probably an influencer there, working hard by a poolside. So I'm going to come to the question of your seed fund and things in a moment, but I just wanted to sort of round off this kind of view of the whole piece by just getting your feeling on how have the universities received this. You've got 4 universities there doing interesting things. Do they think it's a good thing? And then is it the same in your regional organisations, the LEPs and things? Do they think it's an important initiative? What's you might think it's important, but does anyone else?
David, I'll answer this one. It's interesting. I think we've gone from a position where perhaps 5 or 6 years ago our respective vice chancellors and senior members of staff wouldn't have sort of spin outs and commercial activity on the tip of their tongues when they were sort of going out saying, this is something we're sort of reasonable at doing. I think that's changed. I think that's changed a lot in this sort of journey that we've been on. And I think we've been really careful as we've developed what we've got is to not just do it in our little black boxes within our institutions, but to reach out and engage really closely with our, a lot of our stakeholders within the universities. And one of the key things that we did when we pulled together the broader Connected Capability project was we built a marketing communications role into the team. It's a part-time role, But part of that we did, we looked closely at our key stakeholders, and it's not just the outside world, but also our inside world as well. So how we engage with our academic base, how we engage with our senior management as well. So that's all been part of what we've been doing. So we are now being mentioned in press releases and a whole range of activities that perhaps we wouldn't have been done. So that's not us instigating that. That's through our institutional comms. So that's one thing. But I think also we're demonstrating true value, and that we're starting to show the leverage that we're getting. The seed fund we'll talk about perhaps in a moment, but that's leveraged significant additional funding from other investors. We're going to see substantial investment happening within region, and that's becoming critically important to our broader regional economy. And again, one of the things that we did as we set up the Northern Accelerator in terms of our advisory groups, I have a group that holds me account in terms of am I delivering my KPIs. But I also have a group which is my advisory group, which is is strategic leadership within, and it's largely within region, but they sort of sit and advise us as a group in terms of our place within the Northeast. So on that advisory group, I've got a colleague many will know is Roy Sandbach, who's an innovation leader not just in the Northeast but known nationally. I've got the deputy chair of our local LEP, and I've also got the chair of Northumbrian Water. That's the largest corporate sitting in the Northeast. On that group, she also is the deputy chair of CBI. I've got the innovation leads of my local LEP, the Northeast LEP, but also very importantly the Tees Valley Combined Authority. We sit sort of between two LEPs. So I think that's so what we've got is a really, really strong advisory board. Who are supporting us wholeheartedly, but also advising us in terms of the regional activity. But it's all very well receiving advice, engaging very closely with our regional economy has been right at the hub of everything that we've been doing. We've been we are part of the strategic economic plan within the Northeast, and we're being seen as as one of the core groups to be growing our sort of recovery out of COVID. So we are certainly part of the planning there. We have, so if money ever moves to LEPs, which is perhaps debatable at the moment, we have money sort of penciled in terms of how that would support activities within region. But we are very much part of that sort of broad sort of economic instrument, I suppose, that it's being seen within region to grow our economy.
Yeah, I would echo that. The senior management in Newcastle get it. I mean, they know that Newcastle and Durham universities are really important institutions within the Northeast, obviously for research, but also for potential commercialization of that research. So, every startup, by and large, starts off with 1 or 2 employees, etc. But, the ones that started on year 1 of Northern Accelerator, I mean, some of them are employing 30, 40, 50 people now. So they're really starting to have a significant regional economy impact.
And what do you think? Do you think the KEF will make a difference to this? And I looked at your KEF results. Tim, well done. You're in the top 10%. David, you've got a little bit of work to do to move along. Will there be local competition between you to get those numbers going up?
I don't think we want to talk about the KEF metric, because the KEF metric doesn't support what we're doing. Yeah, but that's a story for another time.
I could have a whole debate on the KEF metric on spin-out companies.
But I think being successful in commercialization is obviously part of that whole story, regardless of what the numbers say. And I think whilst our vice chancellors might be sort of waving these things around and asking questions, it's what we feel in heart of hearts. And are we doing a good job? And is that reflected in the numbers? If that's fine. I think what we've got is we've got good spin-outs coming in. We've got more than we had before, and we're not just forming them for the sake of it. But the quality, as David said, is really the marker. Are they raising investment? And the answer is yes, they are. and that's really all I care about, is good quality spin-outs that are raising investment.
Yeah. Does somebody else think they're good? That's a pretty good criterion, isn't it?
Yeah.
So let's move on then to the venture fund. So you talked about your seed fund that you've established through the CCF, and you're looking to build the new venture fund. What do you think? Tell us a bit about how you're going about that, and what you think the challenges are for any university thinking of establishing their own funds in the next period.
Okay, that's I'll make a start, and David, if you want to.
You've got about 2 minutes to answer that question, so you should be fine.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's not easy. It's the first comment. You know, we've always had an ambition to establish a seed fund. We needed to bring on, but with a broader ambition to then use that as a cornerstone to raise the larger fund. So yes, we actually operated I suppose an international search as we looked for our venture capital partner. We actually went out to public procurement for that. Took us 167 days to actually achieve that using the systems we have in this country. But we ran road shows both in London and also in the Northeast. And I think we had about 12 or 15 VC partners expressing interest in terms of what we're doing. We narrowed that down through a process, and ultimately we recruited North Star Ventures as our partner to both manage the seed fund and then to raise the larger fund. And basically they've come on board as a true partner. You know, it's not a master servant in any respect. They are pretty much embedded in our tech transfer processes across the universities. One of the challenges I had, with the team last summer was to establish a limited partnership to manage the seed fund. And bringing 4 universities who are not very familiar with financial vehicles and the legalities of these things was one of the areas we worked really hard as 4 universities to work through. It took us 6 months to get that off the ground, but it was established and launched at the beginning of August last year. And it's already made it's already invested about 80% of the seed fund already, but that is very much the cornerstone of the larger fund that we're raising. We've got a very detailed funding proposition that we're just about ready to go to market with at the moment. And that's a proposition that we've had to articulate within our universities, and getting the universities on board question that you had a moment ago, Sean, that's been really interesting for us. In that, I think I had my venture capital partner talk to my Senate. So we didn't realize we were talking to 94 people at the time, and that's every discipline from classics all the way to cosmology, I suppose. And it was great. We've got a real buy-in to it as an institution, from the Vice Chancellor down, in terms of the broad concept of the fund. And we think it's going to be game-changing in terms of what we're doing, because of the nature of what we want to do with the fund. So I think that's all good. The hard job that we're working through at the moment is we're talking to potential investors, and that activity is going really well. We hope to be closing a fund, at least the first close, before the end of this calendar year, we would hope, with more to follow into next year. But it ain't easy, and it's an area where we've had to bring on board whole parts of the university we wouldn't normally be engaging with. Our finance groups, our finance committees, our councils, and so on has all been part of that journey, I guess.
But you will end up with a fund that is doing early stage investment as well as later stage, so you're going to be able to follow on.
That's definitely.
Yeah. Great. And will there be a SEIS element to it as well for people that are wanting to invest individually, or will it all be through a fund?
There's the ability to co-invest rather than investors within the fund, as far as I'm aware. David, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but what we're looking to do is to have a core fund and then to work with co-investors, and our alumni base being one of those opportunities. But I think we're probably looking more in terms of institutional investors in terms of the core fund.
Yeah. Okay. So that's really helpful. So David, you know, I'm looking at this and thinking this is all fantastic, but the cynic in me thinks, well, actually, a lot of these things you were doing anyway, you kind of packaged it up in a really nice presentation. You've got a flash PowerPoint with some good outcomes there. You know, you said that there's actually, you know, there's some close working together, but you have separate systems, you know, within your institutions. Is this just a, you know, a cunning way to get some CCF money, and you've wrapped it up in a nice package?
Well, the results give the lie to that, really. We're not making the results up. The results are what they are. I mean, we've produced significant increased number, whatever Kat says, we've produced increased number of high quality spin out companies and continue to do so. Yeah, I mean, Tim and I don't have the same tech transfer systems, but we don't really need them, really. We use the same resources for the Northern Accelerator program. The big thing that we have to do is to have this survive without funding going forward, and that's to create the ecosystem where we'll continue to produce high quality opportunities, and we have engagement of business acumen, business skills with those opportunities, and we have the venture fund to support it all. That's where we're trying to get to. It's definitely been a success. What we need to do is try and create an ecosystem where it continues. You know, we could obviously talk other areas of the country that have that. Northeast started from way back, and we're trying to make progress towards where other people are.
Yeah. I mean, the key thing with all of this is to create enough deal flow or ideas or opportunities so that people start bringing money and resources and time to focus on those areas, isn't it?
Well, I think the strong research background at Newcastle and Durham's always been there. But what we've started to do now is increasingly commercialize that research.
And are there any things when you look at your plan for developing this, were there any things that actually you thought you needed but actually you didn't need? You know, are there things that you just kind of you could make it work with you can do enough to make something happen, and you thought there were a whole load of extra things you needed in there which you actually don't need, do you think, or did it all go according to plan?
Well, yeah, I mean, there was one element of the program called the innovation assessment that we probably, in retrospect, tried to make too prescriptive, because we're bringing in an executive into a spin-out company, and then we're offering this service where someone kind of road tests their business plan. Well, it was kind of a bit duplicative, that. So that was probably a mistake to have that program. What we ended up doing is having a much more flexible approach to what that thing did.
Yeah,
I'll answer a slightly different question that you haven't asked, but I think is quite an important one, and that is, as we look to roll out into new phase of Northern Accelerator, what we're looking to do more of is scale up. We're now pretty good at launching spin-out companies, but to a certain extent, it's kind of, well, okay, we'll support you, but you're on your own, and you've got a good CEO now, so go and be a success. And what we like to do is spend a bit more of our resource on identifying the real winners among those, and putting some scale-up funding of some description into those opportunities. So in a way, not just, and I'm not talking venture capital funding because we've got that already, but possibly non-exec directors, chairman, that sort of thing. Yeah. And that's where we're moving away just from startups / spin-outs to really enhancing those spin-outs 3-5 years down the road.
And presumably that's partly where the universities themselves could come in into that. And I was going to ask Tim about other benefits that might have emerged from this. So you see what the direct benefits are. You've got some ventures created, but what does that do for the universities in particular, sort of outside of the entrepreneurship sphere and outside of the spin-out sphere? does it help you? Does it bring in other things, do you think?
I think it does, and it's about having that system or an understanding of of where our research can go, in terms of whether it's into a company or whether it's into people that are either directly associated with the company rather than the academics involved. I'm seeing very much more a building ideas from bottom up rather than waiting for ideas to seep out of the brickwork and do something with it. And I know we're getting a lot of engagement now with people we wouldn't normally talk to. We have in Durham, we have a very strong, I suppose, social science focused health activity. So it's not the medical school, but it's more about it's about people and impacts on health. And we're really starting to have some really interesting conversations there about what that is and how we can take our ideas out of fairly non-commercially funded activity, but look at how we can get better, more impact and maybe even a commercial opportunity arising out of some of the, we do things on mental health, for example, and how can we take the learning from those programs and take them forward, and whether that's a commercial vehicle or not is we're not quite sure yet, but we're starting to have those sorts of conversations, I think, which if we didn't have all the routes to take things forward, we can introduce these people to our venture capital partner, for example, and get a very hard commercial view. But we've also got other ways of testing these ideas and looking at routes to take. But I think it is more of a diversity of routes to take ideas, whether it's social or economic impact ideas forward. Certainly seeing that. I mentioned earlier the sort of whole venture fund sort of concept, that we see that as part of a story. The beginning of a story won't necessarily be the first fund that we raise, but it's also it's the ideas that we want to be taking forward and how we build those ideas around our research base. And indeed, it may ultimately inform our research base in terms of where some of the key commercial challenges lie in the future. Which I would hope if there's a legacy which goes beyond just raising a pile of money, it would be that we've actually shaped our research community as well in some respects. Not suggesting that the university just does a complete right-hand turn to just go this way, but hopefully that elements within our research might be impacted upon this way as well.
Certainly, I think our experience is that you often have to build the economy around you so that economy can invest in R&D with yourselves. So there's that's where when you get into the scale up area, that's where that becomes interesting. Okay, well, I think that's been fascinating, and I'm intrigued to know. We'll have to invite you back again to find out what's next for the Northern Accelerator. Is it going to be a conquest of the South? I imagine that must be on the cards. But
we put up walls to keep the South just north of us anyway.
Yeah, so as long as it stays north of Watford, we'll be okay. So, David and Tim, it's been really great having you talk to us from the shed. Thank you for sharing your experiences in the Northern Accelerator. It's been great. And now I'm going to pass back to Maxine, who can let us know what we're going to do next.
Okay,
thanks,
thank
everyone.
you. Thanks very much, Sean. Tim, David, really, really interesting. Thank you. And I definitely would be interested in a follow-up session. Really appreciate your time and thank you for spending some time in the shed. Okay, that's it for today. So please do keep an eye on newsletters and social media for the details of many more things which are coming up over the next few months. And a special note, of course, in your diaries, please, for our conference, which is running from the 8th to the 10th of June online. That's it. We'll see you again soon, hopefully. Have a good afternoon, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.